and welcome to Crime Bytes, the show where we talk about some truly bizarre and disturbing crime cases. My name is Liz, and today is True Crime Tuesday. So we just wrapped up a short Joker Killer series in preparation for Follie A. Feel free to let me know what you thought about it in the comments. At the time of filming this, it's coming out today, actually, so I'm filming this Friday and it's opening night. I won't be able to see it this weekend anyways, despite my excitement, and I'm going to try and get my butt to the theater while it's still out, probably alone, but whatever. We'll see. But I got very interested in the concept of Follie A, or Madness for Two, so we're going to look at a few cases over the next couple of weeks that have been highlighted as examples of this. Before we do that though, let's pause for a quick promotion. Okay, this one I'm beyond psyched for because, yes, I got Crime Bytes hoodies. Maybe it's a bit premature, but I couldn't help myself. I love it, it's comfortable, and if you like my little innocent asshole shark here, I got comfy big hoodies, and I strongly encourage you to grab one. They have this really cool true crime all the time on the back here, and I am beyond obsessed. And that is not all. I have these cute little earrings on. I had axes last week, but look at these little shanks. I've got these awesome freaking shanks. And that is not all either. There's saws, freaking saws, more shanks, and last but not least, hatchets. Okay. I don't know. I just love stuff like that, and if you do too, I have a little Etsy store. It's been a small part of my side hustle for a little bit now, but I am going to try and grow it a bit more this fall, and I have these adorably horrifying earrings, Crime Bytes hoodies, and some other interesting art and jewelry on there, and we'll see. I'll be trying to put up more as the holidays approach. The shop name is Funky Sharky Designs. I have a thing for sharks, as you can see, and I will post a link in the description. I will also have a 20% coupon code for my listeners that will be active through the new year, and I'll pop that right up here. I'll have that available for you in the description as well. So come check me out, get your fun Halloween earrings and your shark hoodies, and let's get back to today's story. So, Follie A. Everything sounds cooler in French, and this concept is described as a rare psychotic disorder where two or more people who are in close relationships share in a specific delusion. Usually there is a primary person who influences a secondary person or people. People actually used to be diagnosed with this, although the DSM-4 had it labeled as a shared psychotic disorder. The DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and we are currently on our 5th edition. The DSM-5 does not even list it as its own entity and encourages physicians to diagnose these cases as delusional disorder, or within other specified schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorder. So I'm not sure. I feel like it might be doing the concept an injustice, but let's look at our first case, and today's example is going to be Follie A that occurs between friends. So let's start by meeting Leonard Lake. Leonard was born on October 29th of 1945 to Elgin and Gloria Lake. When he was 6, his parents would separate, and he and his siblings would go to live with his grandparents. Apparently, his grandmother would encourage him to take naked pictures of his sisters, which I don't know how or why, but what? This would encourage or fuel a lifelong obsession with filming things, specifically porn, and beyond, let's just say for now. When he got older, he would graduate into coercing his sisters to perform sexual acts on him, and it's unclear whether or not his grandmother encouraged or even knew about these acts, but whether or not she did, it would happen, and it would continue throughout his young adulthood. He would also kill and torture mice and then experiment with different chemicals to see how long it would take to dissolve their bodies. Along with this, he would also become obsessed with a book, A Collector, about a clerk who collected butterflies and then decided to abduct a woman to be part of that collection. As you can see, we're building quite the perfect storm here. It would become his favorite book and a full-on fantasy. When he was 19, Lake joined the Marine Corps and would serve 2 tours in the Vietnam War as a radio operator. He joined in 1969, but in 1971 he would be diagnosed with a schizoid personality disorder and was given a medical discharge. He would return to San Francisco and he would move out to a commune. One of the things that he had was this one-horned goat, and he would name it Sir Lancelot and use it to try and lure women to pose naked with him. Sorry, there's too much with this one, and I'm not even to the terrible things yet. He would go on and get married and start making amateur porn films, but not really simultaneously, or should I say, his wife didn't know about this little side hustle at first, if you could even call it that. And not just any porn films either. He was extremely into the bondage and sadomasochism stuff, which in and of itself can be fine, but obviously it can also segue into some darker things for some people. And when his wife did find out, it would drive her to leave him. And after that, he would marry a woman named Clara Lynn Balsas, who went by Cricket. And Cricket would support Lake's porn ambitions, and she would even appear in some of his films. Now we're going to talk a little about Leonard Lake's brother, Donald Lake. Donald was actually disabled as a child when he was hit by a train. Yeah, and he was described as kind and gentle by people who knew him, but Leonard just completely resented him. He looked at the disability as leeching, even though he was legitimately disabled from an accident. So in 1982, Leonard decided to invite Donald to come help him with a house-sitting job, and Donald was never seen or heard from again, besides a letter that he sent to their mother claiming to have moved to Reno to go live with drug dealers. It's believed that Donald was Leonard Lake's first victim. He would go on to rent a P.O. box and continue to cash his brother's disability checks. Just a few months later, Lake would move in with a friend named Charles. Charles and Lake went way back, and Charles was even Lake's best man at his wedding to Cricket. That May, Lake would invite Charles to go on a road trip to Tahoe, and Charles had 2 daughters that he left with a babysitter to go on that trip. Lake would return alone and tell the babysitter that Charles had ran off with another woman and just proceed to cash whatever government checks Charles was receiving. The freaking audacity. And his body was eventually found, although not in the first search, proving that he did not in fact run off with some woman and abandon his children. Then in April of 1984, Jeffrey Askarin would disappear, and although never found, his vehicle would be recovered near Lake's cabin. Now we need to introduce ourselves to Charles Ng, the next person Lake would invite out to his cabin. Charles Ng was born in Hong Kong in 1960 and was the son of a very harsh businessman. He was 15 years younger than Leonard Lake. He was a known kleptomaniac, and although his family had money, he could not seem to help himself from stealing, and as a child and young adult, he would constantly be getting into trouble for it. When he was 15, he was sent to a boarding school in England, but that didn't go very great as well. He would do academically well, but again, just couldn't stop stealing. So when he was 18, he moved to the US on a student visa. He was involved in a hit and run and was arrested, but the person survived. And when he was 22, somehow he would join the Marine Corps by lying about his citizenship and would get arrested for stealing there as well, and then be sentenced to 14 years of military prison in Hawaii. And it was here that he would begin his friendship with Leonard Lake. Lake had placed an ad in a magazine that Ng was reading in prison advertising weapons for sale. Ng responded to the ad and the two would start writing to each other. Ng was impressionable and he looked to Lake almost as a father figure, and their friendship would deepen. So at this point, Lake had killed at least 2, possibly 3, or even more people. It's unclear if he was considering murdering Ng as well. He had no qualms about murdering his brother and his other close friend, who ironically was also named Charles. So in 1983, Ng would escape and he would run to Lake, who at this point was living in the mobile home in Northern California. The police would catch up with them and catch Charles there, and this would also get Lake arrested for possession of illegal firearms. Lake would get out on bail and go into hiding, and Ng would be sent to jail in Kansas, where he was formally dishonorably discharged from the Army and released just a year later in July of 1984. He would then decide to reunite with Lake in the cabin in Northern California, and it was here at this time that the two men would plot and carry out their twisted fantasies. It's important to note that Lake kept very detailed journals and even video diaries, and I'll play a piece of that in just a moment. It's just so gross, but this entry is significant. He journaled that Ng was initially very hesitant to get involved with his plan. And what plan was that exactly? Lake had built a bunker on the ranch, and he called his operation Operation Miranda, or the Miranda Plan, after that book, The Collector. In the book, the woman who gets collected had the name Miranda. He started to believe that there was going to be a nuclear attack, and after that, we would need to repopulate. And well, who better to father all the new children than him? I mean, really. It's not funny, but at the same time, really, dude? Anyhow, his plan was to capture his ideal woman, enslave her, and have her be his sex slave until he had no use for her anymore. So I'm going to play a few clips from Lake's video manifesto, if you will, where he talks about this plan a bit, and you can hear it in his own words.
Need to explain. This tape, what you're hearing now, is going to be the lead-in of the various phases of construction of a building, which hopefully will be the first of a series of underground buildings. The building will be multi-purpose. It'll serve as a tool room and a storage room for a lot of valuables and miscellaneous stuff that are useful to have, but not particularly items of immediate use that should be in the house. But the main emphasis of the building, the whole justification for its expense and its effort, will be a hidden portion of it, a secret room, if we can call it that, that will house a cell. This is the word that I've used in my discussions of this subject. A jail cell, if you will. And the purpose of that cell, and the main purpose, hence, of the building, will be the imprisonment of a young lady who probably at this moment is unknown to me. And nothing more. Well, actually I shouldn't say nothing more. The building, even the cell, will be multi-purpose. These are very trying times. There are wars and rumors of wars going on. Today 135 Marines were killed in Lebanon. So having secret rooms, underground rooms, protected by concrete and steel and buried by 4 feet of earth, these are fairly safe investments, and the room and the building and the whole ultimate series of buildings will be designed not around the cell, but ultimately around the concept of a secret, secure living place. It's always been the obligation to entertain or amuse or satisfy a particular woman or girlfriend's whims of emotional whatevers. Such an arrangement, of course, is not only blatantly sexist, but highly illegal. There's no doubt about it. It violates all of the human rights and blah 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 blah. I'm gonna spare posterity my concepts of other people's morality. I'm explaining my morality, what I feel, what I want, and as of this moment, I'm going to try to get it. Of course, obvious, and even beyond sexual, such a woman, totally enslaved, would be useful for the mundane chores that I have to do, but I'm not particularly interested in doing. Clean house, washing dishes, etc. Slave, there's no way around it. Primarily a sexual slave, but nonetheless a physical slave as well. And I believe that I can, if I can construct a holding cell, a place where I can put such a woman, where I can walk off and feel secure that she can't escape, that I can create a facility that is so stark and so empty, so cold, so quiet, so totally removed from the world, that fairly quickly, by a combination of painful punishments when I'm displeased and minor rewards such as music or magazines or some such stuff, that I can quickly condition, this is my belief, that I can quickly condition a young woman to cooperate with me fully, and in fact even look forward to cooperating with me fully, simply if for no other reason than such cooperation would be a relief from boredom.
Yeah. All right. So that's literally what we're working with here, and just the way he states it so matter-of-factly and like it's not at all deranged and like this is what he wants so he's gonna get it. Anyways, hesitant or not, Charles Ng started killing literally the month that he moved back in with Lake. On July 11th of 1984, Donald Giulietti had placed an ad in the paper requesting someone to meet him and his partner for some gay sex. And when he opened his door to greet the man who responded, he was shot in the face. His partner, Richard Carrazzo, was also shot and left for dead, but managed to survive and ultimately identified Charles Ng as the man who shot him. He would be the only known victim to survive Ng and Lake. On July 25th of 1984, Lake and Ng would answer an ad for video equipment and show up at the house of Harvey Doves. Harvey lived with his wife Deborah and their 16-month-old son Sean. They killed Harvey and Sean, and then they kidnapped Deborah and took her to their underground bunker. They took all of the video equipment, and they would make her do whatever they wanted in the worst possible way, all while videotaping it. Lake would be the more dominant of the pair, but Ng would do everything that he told him to do, and very willingly. After weeks of torturing her, Lake and Ng decided they were done with her, and they shot her. They would also target men to steal their money and their identities. 34-year-old Randy was attempting to sell his van and put it on an ad that Lake and Ng answered. They needed a van. Unfortunately, it got towed before they could even use it. They would use hog ties so that their victims had no chance of escape, and they would also have the women that they kidnapped write to anybody that might miss them in their own handwriting that they were moving away to throw things off. On April 12th of 1985, they would abduct a couple, although the details surrounding this would be a little blurry as well. Michael Carroll was apparently Ng's cellmate during his time in military confinement, and apparently he was into torturing and murdering people as well. It's speculated that he would actually join Lake and Ng a few times to watch or participate, and whether or not he offered up his girlfriend or Lake and Ng decided to take her is unclear. The details there are a little murky, but they would ultimately decide to kill Michael either way and then call his girlfriend at the supermarket where she worked and tell her that he was in trouble, possibly shot. She would come and they would hold her captive and torture her. Lake apparently thought that she would be his perfect Miranda slave. At some point, they would start to get bored or feel invincible, and they would start to target their neighbors. On April of 1985, they would kidnap their neighbors Brenda O'Connor, Londi Bond, and their 1-year-old Lonnie Jr. Apparently, Lonnie and their friend Robin Scott Stapley went to go confront Lake about being a creep and other neighbor-type issues, like maybe not asking his girlfriend to pose naked, things like that. Anyways, Lake and Ng would murder Lonnie, Robin, and Lonnie Jr. on the spot and keep Brenda as their slave for the next few weeks. This is one of the ones that they have footage of it's out there on YouTube, and I'm not going to play any of those clips on this channel out of respect for the victims, but you can look them up if you want to see them. They're out there and they're simply heartbreaking. Lake and Ng taunt Brenda about killing her child, and she goes from defensive, telling them that they can't take her kid away from her, to realizing not only that they killed her baby, and then it just breaks her. And the videos are terrible to watch, but that part in particular is it's pure evil. I can't. Apparently, the 2 infants that did perish were killed by Charles, and he did it by putting them in pillowcases and bashing them against a rock or a wall, which is just straight evil. Lake and Ng have been described as dominant and subservient pairs of lust killers. They are mentioned as a case of Follie A because Charles Ng definitely fed into Leonard Lake's delusions and fantasies. Many argue that had they never met, Charles may have never become a killer, and I think that's very possible. He may not have. This case holds a special place in my heart. I don't know if it's the right way to put it, but I spent a semester in college reading this book. I actually dug it out of storage to look through. It's called Die For Me by Don Lassister. I'm awful with names today. It goes over the whole case. So yeah, I studied this one in a class where we were looking at pairs of killers, and it haunted me for many reasons, obviously, but what always stuck with me is that Charles may not have been a killer, but for Lake. Anyhow, Follie A. What do you guys think about this case and that concept? Alright, so are you ready to hear how these assholes got caught? We get back to Ng's shoplifting habit. Yeah, that's what ends up doing these guys in. It's almost poetic, but not really because of all the horrific things that did take place. So on June 2nd of 1985, Lake and Ng would go to a local hardware store, and while there, Ng could not resist stealing a vise. The store would call the police as Lake was attempting to say it was a misunderstanding and was even trying to pay for the vise, and yet Ng threw it in the trunk of his car and just kind of took off. But I guess they weren't buying it, and they looked at Lake's license, and he looked nothing like the man in the picture, Robin Scott Stapley. And when they looked at his car, because that's where Ng threw the vise, they found a firearm with an illegal silencer in the trunk. So it was not looking good for him at that point. The license plate on his car was registered to Lonnie Bond, and the VIN on the car was registered to a Paul Costner, who was also a missing person at that time. So that's 3 different missing people, all connected to this one man who they still didn't even have a real name for. So they brought him in for questioning, and when they did, he would ask for a pen, paper, and a glass of water. They would give him what he wanted, and when they would return, they would find him just convulsing on the floor. They would rush him to the hospital, but he would die just a few days later after being pronounced brain dead on the scene. He had sewn a cyanide pill into his jacket just in case he was ever apprehended. Because although it was okay for him to hold people against their will and do unspeakable things to them, he could never do prison himself. And Ng was actually able to flee on foot when all of this went down, but they would find the house and the bunker of horrors and all the videos after they found a utility bill for the cabin in the name of Clara Lynn Belazes, or Cricket, Lake's second wife. When they searched the area, they found around 45 pounds of human bones. 45 pounds. And remember how Lake used to dissolve his mice? He had 2 large barrels filled with acid that were dissolving various human remains. They would find an envelope with some of the victims' IDs in these barrels as well. And in the meantime, Cricket drove Ng to the airport where he boarded a flight to Detroit under an alias. Cricket, or Clara Lynn Belazes, sorry if I'm getting that name wrong, maybe, was granted full immunity for her involvement, and that isn't even completely known. She definitely knew that things were going on, but beyond that, it's not clear if she was an active participant besides not telling people what was happening, which is terrible enough, but she did cooperate fully, sort of. She started by allowing them to search the place, and then when they found things, she made them get a warrant. But either way, she was granted full immunity, and she would eventually end up being a key witness in Ng's trial. But first they had to find and catch Ng, and just about a month later, on July 6th of 1985, Ng would be in Alberta, Canada. And he would actually shoot a security guard when he was caught, drumroll please, stealing. And this time? A can of frickin' beans. A can of beans! But there was also some cookies and breadsticks and herring and rope. He really couldn't stop himself to save his life, which is kind of a good thing. But yeah, he gets himself to frickin' Canada, and then he gets caught shoplifting a can of beans. You seriously cannot make this stuff up. And he would end up serving 4 years in Canada for shooting the security guard, who fortunately also did survive. And after this, he was extradited back to the US, but that wasn't easy either. Canada doesn't have the death penalty, and obviously that was appealing to him. California wanted to fry him, and I don't blame them, but Ng apparently wasn't completely inept because he picked Canada, and extraditing him to be put to death went against their Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So he fought to stay in Canada, but on September 26th of 1991, he was finally extradited back to the United States to be tried. He was indicted of 12 charges of first-degree murder, and at first tried to say that it was all Lake's idea, and he was just there, spectating. At first, he didn't know they had all the video evidence and everything either, and when he did find out, he argued that those actions were done out of fear and an attempt to please Lake. I call bullshit. Anyways, Ng's shenanigans did not stop there. He went through 10 attorneys and then decided to represent himself, which delayed things further because he had to prepare for that as well. During that time, he managed to obtain the phone number of one of the jurors and attempted to contact them in hopes of causing a mistrial. This endeavor was not successful, thankfully. His antics got so bad at one point that they kept him in a metal cage during the trial when he wasn't physically in the courtroom. A metal cage. On top of this, he also sued the state of California for numerous injustices, can you imagine? Including not allowing him to practice the art of origami in his cell. Sir, At the time, his trial was the most expensive in California history at over $20 million. Digest that for a second. $20 million spent putting this clown on trial. For comparison, O.J. Simpson cost California $9 million. He would end up being convicted of 11 of the 12 charges. The jury was deadlocked on Paul Costner, who was the owner of the Prelude that they got Lake with at that store where they were shoplifting, and I don't know what happened there, but they did agree on all 11 other charges, and they did agree on the death penalty. And in all, it's unknown how many victims Lake and Ng had in total, but the estimate is as high as 25. The known names that I did not cover in today's story are Maurice Rock, Randy Jacobson, Cheryl Okoro, Clifford Penteru. I'm so sorry if I can't say half of these. I still wanted to try and honor them still, and Jeffrey Gerald, and possibly others, which is just chilling. The judge would conclude Mr. Ng was not under any duress, nor does evidence support that he was under the domination of Leonard Lake. I agree with him, but I still feel like there's a chance he wouldn't have acted this way if not for Lake or someone like Lake. Still 100% guilty and responsible for his actions. He was not under duress. That is clear. He willingly partook in Lake's madness. Follie A. Ng's psychologists would call it a dependent personality disorder, which does seem fitting. Dependent derangement for sure. Ng is still incarcerated in California, as there has been a moratorium on the death penalty since 2019, and the last actual execution took place in 2006. So it looks like for now, quite possibly the rest of his life, Ng won't have to face the death penalty like he feared. And he literally got sentenced to die. What do you guys think about that? Apparently, everyone who has been sentenced to death in California is still technically on death row and would, in theory, be executed should they ever reinstate the death penalty. Right now, he is being housed at California Medical Facility, which I couldn't find exactly why he was transferred to this prison recently, but he is 64 or so now, right? So possibly old age or maybe a medical condition. Anyhow, that's probably where he will die. And that's all I have for today for Leonard Lake and Charles Ng. And as always, I want to leave you guys on a more positive note. And quite frankly, with everything I just spewed out, I'm not really sure how to do that. I usually can say that we're improving at the way we look at mental health and such disorders, but I'm not even sure if I can say that here. I think we're leaning towards separating the patients into a singular delusional disorder and negating the fact that there are in many relationships a shared component to many delusions. I feel like that's possibly backwards movement. I don't know though. What are your thoughts on that? I know every case is different, so I don't know if this is a good term to take or not, but it seems like we're taking it nonetheless. So to get a little more personal, I guess, but not too much, don't worry. I've spent the last week running back and forth between these three households while my family is on, well, some of them are working, one's on vacation, all giving attention to the doggies in our family and cramming in for this episode, and my head feels fried, and this case is just so full of vile and horrific things, worse than you could make up. I'm fried. So I'm gonna show you some cute dogs for our positive note, and hopefully that takes the edge off, because that's all I got. Here is Dasha, my sister's husky puppy, and she's fantastic and learning not to nip and eat all the butterflies in the yard. Then we have Ember, my mom's Lhasa Apso, who's a sweetie and thinks she's a lion, and I love them both. And then Scoot here, he's been on here a couple times. He's my baby. He's a grumpy old man, but as you can see, he loves a good true crime story as well. I hope they make you smile, and I will be back next week with another story of Follie A. Until then, please stay safe out there. Bye.